Dakota Wood from the Heritage Foundation is joining us for a very quick visit, last minute, as a matter of fact. Dakota, thank you very much for being here. And North Korea test fires a ballistic missile. The headline screams with the potential to reach the entire United States, according to Japan. Let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, North Korea is always one of those nations we've got to keep an eye on. But, I mean, obviously this is worrisome. Give me your perspective.
Well, we've been tracking this missile, Hwasong-18. Previously, we thought it would cover about half the U.S., but this report out of Japan says the entirety, and that's all math. The energy out of the rocket, the trajectory that it can reach, and what would be its maximum range. So what it really shows us is that a half-starving country that's a pariah state, doesn't have any trade with anybody other than China, perhaps, or the black market stuff, still feels it important enough to invest the resources it does have in weaponry, nuclear warheads, long-range missiles. It's made attempts to put a satellite in orbit. All of these tests add to the body of scientific knowledge, which allows them to improve their capabilities. Why would they do that? Well, because they don't want to be coerced. If the U.S. or South Korea or somebody wants to hold them account to all their illicit activities, well, then they rattle their nuclear saber, and they prove that they have the ability to range anywhere. If you can hit the United States, you can hit just about anywhere else as well, right? So it shows that they're serious about having this lethal capability, and they can't be ignored.
Are they getting help from, I don't know, China, Iran? I mean, it just seems like North Korea, they have resources, but the people are starving, and Kim Jong-un is crazy. Maybe he's crazy like a fox, but is there other nations that are helping North Korea?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you probably recall a name, a guy by the name of A.Q. Khan, goes back several years. He was the head of the Pakistani nuclear program. And it was revealed that he was, selling, or with the approval of the Pakistan government, sharing information on nuclear weapons design with various countries, and North Korea was one of them. There is a rumor that the North Koreans have been helping the Iranians with their nuclear development program in exchange for Iran, either giving them money or supporting their illicit trade in drugs and weapons and other sorts of things. The Chinese certainly have an interest in helping out North Korea, but not completely. I mean, Kim Jong-un and his sister and his parents, in past generations have all been halfway crazy a bit. And so, they have their own agenda in play as well. The North Koreans are smart. They've got a dynamite, effective cyber program. Remember, the hacking of Sony, movie corporation and banks here in the United States. So that they are not stupid people, really, really sharp. But to get the materials, the resources, propellant for rockets, enriched uranium, to get the raw materials and those sorts of things, they are absolutely getting help from external actors.
I mean, this is a big deal for Kim Jong-un, too, right? I mean, part of this is, on the world stage, he is now going to command more respect, and the people within North Korea who are starving, I assume they're still starving. I don't think there's been any change in that. But for him, this is a very big deal on the world stage.
Yeah, I mean, he's driven by ego, right? And he's driven by his desire to maintain a hold on power. So there is some of this, godlike worship, deity that's been manifested since his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, and then Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un, on down the line. And so his apparatus puts him up there as this godlike figure. And there's all these crazy stories, about hitting a hole in one when he was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And, riding bareback like Putin up the mountains, on a silvery horse. I mean, it's just nutty. But if he can demonstrate these actual manifestations of physical military power, it does enhance his reputation, and even if we think he's a horrible person, if you've got a nuclear weapon and can demonstrate, that the design works, and you've got missiles that you've proven can, go certain distances, you can't ignore them. So it's respect in the sense that, we respect, really bad weather, we respect dangers, and, what can happen in auto accidents, right? So it's not an admiration respect, but you have to understand what he's bringing to the table.
So how accurate are these missiles? I mean, so we know that Hamas has terrible rockets, right? You never know what the heck they're going to do. Number one, how accurate would these missiles be? And number two, do we have the ability to shoot them down?
Great points. Getting it up off the launch pad and out, through the atmosphere and into outer space. I'm not going to say it's easy, right? It's a difficult feat, but they have shown the ability to do that. Now, when you come back in through the atmosphere, the thing is traveling at Mach 20. I mean, it's, the heat, the turbulence, the shaking of the components, the pressure. So can the warhead survive the reentry and still operate, detonate and explode as designed when it gets to its destination? And they haven't shown that, at that kind of range and that kind of speed. So we don't know. They would need to use some kind of an active missile test and some kind of range, and they haven't done that yet. But you can't discount, that they would succeed in something. So it's a real concern unless we can prove otherwise. So that's really hard. Whether it hits accurately is part of all that targeting thing. Can we shoot it down? Questionable. Our missile defense systems are in Alaska. They were specifically designed for what was called a limited strike, a limited number of inbound missiles, primarily coming from North Korea. We don't have the ability to hit something off of the launch pad. That's called boost phase intercept. And on the terminal end, let's say this thing's coming into New York City, it's moving so fast that intercepting it is very difficult. So this mid-course, when it's in the outer space area before it's re-entered, that's where our real capabilities are designed. And we haven't had to intercept something from North Korea. So the experimentation, the test shots that we do every once in a while shows that our systems work. Would it work in extremis in this kind of emergency? We got pretty good stuff, pretty confident of that, but I hope we don't have to test it in a real-world situation.
So talking about this test of this ballistic missile that could reach, they say, anywhere in America. So this is clearly a message, among other things. And so what should our response be, if any?
Well, continue funding for the new missile defense systems going into Alaska, this ground-based deterrent intercept, GBDI, I think is what it's called. That needs to absolutely go because, you don't see people giving up nuclear weapons. We've got more people trying to pursue them and get them and improving their designs, like this shot or missile test out of North Korea. So that absolutely has to go, and that's tied to the defense budget. How much are we willing to spend in the nation's defense? And that's just one component. Right? What's Hugo Chavez going to do down in Venezuela? Making a claim on a neighboring country's oil fields. How is this war in the Middle East going to unfold? And the Houthi rebel faction in Yemen increasingly sending drones and firing, cruise missiles, etc., at passing commercial ships, to the extent that a couple of the major shipping companies like Maersk has told the ships not to go through that area. That increases costs and creates more turbulence in global economic markets. And then who knows what's going to happen in Ukraine? Not looking really good for the Ukrainians. Does Russia end up taking over, and does that pose an enhanced threat to NATO and U.S. interests in Europe? So it's a big, messy world, and the North Koreans are just showing how messy and dangerous it can be. So this continued funding of missile defense systems, improving hopefully the ability to get something like a boost phase intercept, but that means you have to have capabilities much, much closer to North Korea, whether they're based in South Korea or ships off the coastline or whatever. But all of that stuff is money and people. We've got a horrible recruiting environment. We've got an aging military, and we've got these debates in Washington, D.C. about passage of these defense spending bills. So I think it's just a reminder to all of us that we don't live, safe, free, and prosperous here in the U.S. Without these sorts of investments.
Well, there's so many, and you just named a few. There's so many threats to America. We have cyber. We have these missiles coming from, the nations like North Korea. We have all this stuff that's coming across our southern border, all the illegal folks coming across our southern border, all the while, this headline, you just touched on it. U.S. military has now shrunk to its lowest numbers of active duty members since 1941. I was reading a story earlier today about how I think one of our military ships shot down 14 different drones from those from those Houthi rebels, I guess. So I mean, you're right. Everywhere you turn, everywhere you look, every website you go to is indicative of yet another threat. Are we ready for all this?
No, we're not. Shooting down those missiles or drones from these destroyers in the Red Sea, those aren't done with machine guns. I mean, if you're using a missile off of one of the ships to shoot down one of these drones, those missiles range in price from $2 to $3 million a piece. So if you're shooting down 10, 12, 14 drones, that's 14 shots with a $2 million missile. So you're talking somewhere around $30 million or more, just in one set of engagements. So to have these capabilities, it costs a lot of money. The Army at the end of the Cold War had 770,000 soldiers. Last year it had shrunk to 452,000. 452 this year in 2024 coming up, they'll shrink again to 445,000 soldiers. So almost half of the Army that we had near the end of the Cold War in a very, very disordered world. Our Navy keeps shrinking and the average age of ships keeps increasing. Cold War, the Air Force pilots used to fly more than 200 hours a year. And this year they're averaging about 125 hours a year. So you're flying half as much. We have half the size of the Navy, almost half the size of the Army, and American youth just don't have a whole lot of interest in serving the country. And based on obesity rates and substance abuse and criminal records, a very, very small percentage, like 27% or something like that, are even eligible for service, even if they wanted to. So it's not a really good picture.
Dakota, last question. Lindsey Graham over the weekend, I'm going to quote, I don't have the audio, but he said, I've never been more worried about a 9/11 than I am right now. And I've only got about 90 seconds. I mean, how worried are you about a 9/11 style attack?
Very. 8,000 to 10,000 people, sometimes 12,000 people a day are coming across our southern border. The Mexican authorities, in engaging some drug cartels, it was a big gunfight down there, came up with something, what was it, the 15 IEDs that had been made. Was that for use in Mexico or use in the United States? And we're seeing a huge number of third country nationals being picked up inside the U.S. from Iran, from Pakistan, from China, from Afghanistan. I mean, these people are coming to Latin America to come up into the United States. And with an unsecured southern border, you can just imagine what kind of threats manifest out of that.
750 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dakota, as always, thank you for joining us here on Super Talk 99.7